Welcome to another episode of Founders Club. Today we're going to be talking to Pete Reese. He is the founder of RealVest and he is one of the top land investors in the country. He's going to be breaking down exactly how we can start doing land deals all over the country, all from the comfort of your own home, why land investing is one of the most profitable and least competitive niches in real estate, and how you can take advantage of it right now in today's market. If you have any questions, put them in the box down below. Make sure you check out all the links in the description. And as always, if you like money and you like real estate, this is the show for you. Hit that subscribe button and we'll see you on the inside.
Welcome to Founders Club, the show for real estate entrepreneurs.
So let's give Pete a warm welcome. Pete, welcome to Founders Club.
Well, thanks for having me, Oliver. I really was looking forward to this.
Yeah, likewise. So, just to kind of set the scene, maybe we talk first about just why land, because I know a lot of people, they don't really know a whole lot about land, and it seems kind of like an obscure thing. But I know there's lots of ways. And another, I think, limiting belief is that land doesn't cash flow. But I also know there's lots of different ways where you can make land cash flow. And so just excited to have you on. And why don't we just jump into just kind of like why land and kind of how you got into it?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And if I'm looking back and if I'm being honest with myself, I never would have envisioned getting into the land niche itself. I mean, I've always been interested in single family homes, just like most people. And in fact, about well, I guess over 20 years ago now is when we bought our first home 23 years ago. And yeah, just bought a single family home here in San Diego County. And at the time, I think we paid 205,000 for it with an FHA loan. And, it seems like nothing compared to home values these days. But and then that kind of led me, we did some fix up on that home and we kind of went down the path of flipping homes, getting into buying and selling homes just to sort of fix them up a little bit and then resell them. Market crashed. Actually, I got my broker's license before the market crashed in 2008 here, and then focused for a little while on being an REO broker for banks. So that was my whole focus for a number of years. And I was thankful to have business at a time when a lot of people in real estate were struggling. Although
Yeah,
that's not the best business to
in
be
those
in.
days, those accounts were huge.
Oh, yes. So,
Yeah.
it was a crazy time. I didn't like specifically doing that, but I was willing to do anything to kind of, keep the income flowing in at a time when things were a little challenging in the economy for sure. But so I had gotten out of like investing myself for a while, and I was kind of spooked by the market crash and everything that happened with it. And I was for a while there, I was just finding deals for other investors too, like single family home deals and stuff like that. And one thing led to another. And then I started. My wife has been a blogger and travel blogger for a long time, and she had a lot of people asking her about like how to get into that business, how to do what she did. And I was like, hey, let's create an education program around that. So I got out of real estate altogether for probably about 5 years and just, worked on building that business up. We did a lot of traveling at the time. Everything was great, but I had that itch to get back to real estate. I always loved real estate, and it's kind of my true calling, I feel. And I was looking for, I wanted to get back in from the investment side of things. And I was researching all the different niches in investing, and I didn't really want to do fix and flips anymore. I liked the multifamily thing. I mean, that made a lot of sense to me. But the thing that didn't make sense is I was looking for something that had some immediate cash benefits to it as well. It seemed like a lot of the rewards there were delayed. And I just kind of stumbled into some people talking about land investing online, and it kind of made sense to me because they were talking about it being a short-term, cash generating type business, where you're holding these properties for 30 days or so. I mean, 30 to 90 days. And, you're trying to double your money on every deal. So I just sort of like dove head in on that type of on that the land investing thing. Learned everything I could about it. Started buying and selling properties in 2021 is the first year we did that, and I did about 1.3 million in revenue and about almost 50% gross profit margin that year. 2022
Wow.
did about 3.4. Gross profit margin went down to about 40%. And then 2023 did 8.2 at about 40% gross profit margin. So trying to do 20 million this year. So it's scaling every year. It's a great business because it's like I said, we try to double our money on each of these deals, and we are holding them for a really short amount of time. So like 90 days to 100 days has been about the average for the past year or so. Before that, it was even lower, but the market slowed down a little bit. But um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so I never thought about, dreamed of getting into land or anything like that. I just kind of like the business model and how repeatable it was and how easy it was to generate leads and all that stuff, and it just made sense to me, buying and selling. So
Yeah, yeah, I love it, and I definitely want to dig into all of that. Yeah, I think it's crazy that you've had that kind of hockey stick growth over the years. I mean, to do, you went from 1 million to 4 million to trying to get 8 million, now 20 million. I
yeah.
mean, you're taking like big, big steps up. And what's interesting about land is because I actually just closed my first land deal with a friend of mine who I think
Ah,
you know, Dan Habercost. So
congrats.
shout out
Yes,
to
that's
Dan.
awesome. Yeah, Dan's great.
Um, but what's really cool about land that I never realized is just how easy it is to flip. And you can flip in the sense that, the same way when people want to get rid of a house, they just want to get rid of it. They're willing to take less. And as long as you can come in there and close fast, do what you say you're going to do, you can get a lot of really good deals and then just put them back on the market and able to make a nice margin on that. So I kind of want to break down your process and to get to your $20 million target that you're on for this year. How many deals is that?
Yeah, I'd imagine that's probably going to be somewhere in the 400 plus deals,
400
maybe
deals.
this year.
Wow.
So we'll see. We'll see if we can get there. Uh, but yeah, it's one of those things. It's a crazy business in a way because I view it kind of more of the blue ocean, like a blue ocean type strategy rather than the red ocean, which is home flipping and wholesaling. I mean, there's money to be made in there in those markets. There's a lot of people doing it, and it works for a lot of people. But it is ultra competitive. It's tough to get deals locked up. And with land, as long as you can figure out what these properties are worth, it's a really really unique market. I mean, that's the key. You got to really understand how to value these properties and have some confidence in it and put a due diligence process in place to make sure there are no red flags that pop up. But I've kind of chipped away at a system over time that's kind of tried to take care of those things that can come up and everything, and we've done a really good job of eliminating things. In fact, I've done, I don't know, 240 deals or something like that over the past 3 years or whatever. And I just now I lost money on my first deal, which was $500 loss. And that was my fault too because I didn't calculate I didn't estimate my closing costs properly. I thought I had just negotiated a deal to get out of a property that had held for a while, and then I ended up ultimately, when I did the final accounting, I lost like $500 on it. So, but I feel good about that. Like over all those deals, that's been the only property that I've lost money on. So
Yeah, I mean, if you think about that, like how impressive that is that you've done hundreds of deals and you only have one that you've ever lost money on, and it sounds like you almost didn't even lose money on it. You were right there if you only
I
lost five
shouldn't
hundred
have.
bucks.
In
Um,
hindsight, I would have, tried to work some magic to make sure that didn't happen. But, but it is what it is. It is bound to happen
yeah.
at some point.
Yeah, definitely. So I definitely want to go into your full process, but why don't we just start with like kind of how you're picking a market? Because the one thing about land is there's land everywhere, right?
Right.
You can buy little desert squares out in the middle of nowhere. You can buy infill lots in big cities. There's all sorts of different ways. So, how do you look at kind of the types of deals that you want to go after and the types of markets that you're interested in? Pardon the quick interruption, but if you're looking for a little extra help growing your real estate business, make sure you hit the link in the description below to book a one on one consulting session where I will personally help you take your real estate business to the next level. Over the last 15 years, I've grown a brokerage to over 1,000 agents in multiple states, consistently doing over $4 billion a year in sales. And we've been on the Inc. 500 5 times. I would love to personally help you reach your business goals and have the best year you've ever had. Book your session today. And now back to the podcast.
Yeah, great question, because land comes in all different flavors and varieties and locations and everything like that. So one of the things that we look for as far as the market goes is the an actual active market. Properties that are actually selling. When uh, pieces of land are actually selling, not just sitting there on the market and hoping for that buyer to come along. We want stuff actually transacting. So
Yeah.
we figure that out by basically looking at Zillow or Redfin or whatever, and just seeing, doing a search over the past 12 months, see how many properties have sold in that kind of area, and then also see what's currently listed in that area, in that kind of acreage range or whatever. We generally do, when I'm sending out our outreach, we send out direct mail to get most of our deals. So we are sending out to properties that are mostly larger rural properties. And when I say larger, for the most part, 10 acres and above, but sometimes
Okay.
we'll go down to 5 acres. But that's kind of our wheelhouse, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And pretty much there's money to be made in all different types of land, like infill lots, like you talk about, like the suburban neighborhoods where there's just that one lot that hasn't been built on or something like that. Like, people make a lot of money, investors make a lot of money on those deals too. But for me, those rural properties are pretty easy. They're easy to sell. They're forgiving. Generally, if for some reason you miss something and it's not buildable for some reason or another, it's at least it can be used for recreational purposes. So
Yeah. So there's some protections there.
yeah,
Um,
I feel comfortable
so
about it, at
so
least.
I heard you say 10 acres plus, kind of rural is kind of your target. Is that pretty much like in any state, or do you have any like no-go zones or anything like that?
I don't really have a lot of no-go zones. I mean, I have states that I've basically focused on. I like the East and the Southeast. I like, Pennsylvania and west of Pennsylvania, like Ohio, Indiana, and then like down to Kentucky, and all those types of areas there. Texas is good, Oklahoma. There's a lot of states that are good for buying and selling land. But it's interesting. Like, I'll send out mail to particular state, and if we get some momentum and I can find some good people on the ground in those states to work with, agents and brokers that know their stuff, and build a good network in those areas, then I try to do more and more business in those particular areas. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't, as far as states that I would not do, I think Alaska might be tough. I know some of the mapping and everything up there is not as great as some of the other areas. I'm not a big fan of like the middle of the desert type properties that really don't have much use at all. So I don't
Right.
really do much New Mexico or middle of Arizona or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
I just drove back from Las Vegas and I saw a whole lot of that.
I always wanted to buy one of those properties along the 15 there and just do something like crazy, like the world's biggest golf ball or something.
Yeah. That's funny. Me and my business partner, we used to always joke that we're gonna buy one of those little lots and just put a sign on it with our faces and just waving to everybody that's driving either out or back from Vegas. We thought
That would
that
be
would be
great.
funny, but
Different
yeah,
expression depending on which way you're going.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Um, okay, so cool. So, step one, it sounds like you're analyzing a market to find like a good sell-through rate so that things aren't just sitting. you're targeting bigger lots, or bigger in terms of 10 acres and plus. Um, so now let's talk about your approach in terms of how you're marketing to those people or how you're talking to sellers.
Yeah. Well, we actually just send out offer letters to people in the mail. So we're sending out letters, a 2-page letter. First page is kind of like why we're contacting them and who we are and what we can do for them. And the second page is a simple 1-page purchase agreement. So it actually has a price on it and everything. So,
Wow.
sometimes people just sign it and send it back, mail it back without even calling us or anything. Um, Sometimes, and a lot of times, they actually call in. We have a call answering service that answers the phone 24 hours a day. So they call in, and we have the call answering service basically qualifying them for motivation. And sometimes people call and they just want to complain about that the offer was too low, and just they want to talk to Pete and to complain and yell at me or something. But so we use the call answering service to kind of screen for that motivation. And then at this point, I've got team members that handle all the communication with the sellers.
Mhm.
So they are kind of going through a list of questions about these properties, trying to learn more about the properties, trying to just determine if we're going to have any problems with title or anything like that. With land, it's a little different than houses because a lot of these properties have been handed down from generation to generation, and there may be no official paperwork that goes along with that. And they may have just assumed that they were the only heir to a property. Come to find out that there's 15 other cousins that have a partial ownership in it as well. So those type of situations come up, so we try to avoid those by asking some of the questions that we do. And when we put these amounts on our offer letters, sometimes we're right on, sometimes we're too low, sometimes we're too high. And when the property comes in, we look at it in detail. We use a software called Land ID, and Land ID allows us to look it up on our computer. We could tell 90% of what a piece of land is just by looking at that software. It's all kinds of different overlays, contours, and wetlands and flood zone. And we could see the road frontage and a bunch of different satellite images and the lot lines and all this stuff. So then we can have an informed conversation when we're talking with them. And sometimes if we're too high on our initial offer, we'll go back to them and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we didn't realize that there was 50% of this property was wetland. We can't do the original offer amount, but we can do this." So and then it's just simply a matter. Sometimes we can put together a deal. Sometimes we can't. Sometimes people will call in and say, "I want to sell, but your price is too low." Then we'll look at the property in detail, see if we can come up in order to put the deal together, and things like that. So we base our offer prices on averages for a particular county generally.
Okay.
And when you price based off of averages, there's no way to really get exact unless you're looking at each and every property, especially with land. There could be 3 10-acre parcels on the same street, and they're all going to have wildly different values because one's half wetlands, one's flood zone, one's really sloped, and all these different factors come up. So it's really the only way to do it is just kind of based off of the averages, and then adapt when the leads start coming in. So
That's interesting. So you're just straight up sending an offer and kind of hoping for a response. I'm sure some are
yes,
good, some are bad. To your point,
yep,
some people probably just sign it and send it back.
yep.
Um, uh, and so how you're basing your offer price, it sounds like you're saying it's on averages. So like you figure out the average like price of an acre and then kind of reverse engineer. Is that kind of the
Yeah,
model?
exactly. Like for the stuff I do, which are the rural properties, we look at kind of an average price per acre in a particular area. So, say for instance, as an example, I'm going to send to Johnson County, North Carolina, and I go on Zillow and I look at the sales over the past 12 months in Johnson County, North Carolina, and from 10 to 20 acres, and I kind of look on there and I see, I'll generally take 3 comps, and then average them together to come up with sort of an average price per acre. And then I'll plug that in and use that to our offer price. So based
Okay.
off of how
And
many
then
acres.
the way that you're sending out those offers, is that through a software or are you guys manually doing that or how do you guys do that?
Yeah, we use a service called Rocket Print and Mail. So
Okay.
they're a mailing service. So there's kind of a couple parts to preparing the mail. You've got to get the data from somewhere. We use services like Data Tree or PropStream, services like that.
Okay.
So it
Hmm.
allows us to pull public record data in a particular area. We may be like, okay, let's mail all the vacant pieces of land in that Johnson County, North Carolina, over 10 acres. So we'll pull a list. We'll remove duplicates. We'll remove obvious non-sellers, maybe like the railroad or municipality or all these different entities that may own land that will never sell to someone like me,
Right.
and through the mail, like through the process like this. And so we prep our list, we put on the pricing on there, and then we send that list to the mailing service that we use. They mail merge it, so it looks like it's a custom letter and offer for everyone, and they just send them out. It all goes out standard class mail. We use kind of like a standard like number 10 envelope. It's got the kind of clear windows on it, two clear windows on it. So it
Hmm.
looks like either a bill or some sort of official paper, official letter or something from someone. And then, then that's generally what's worked best for us.
And then I'm sure at this point, you're probably sending out hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of these each month. Um, but what would you recommend for someone kind of wanting to get started doing this? Like, what would you say in terms of how many of these should be they be sending to try to generate some leads?
Yeah, that's a great question. So over time, our mail costs have averaged about $3,500 in mail costs for every deal that we get. Now, on average,
Okay.
our average profit per deal has been about $30,000 per deal. So it makes sense, spend $3,500 in order to get $30,000 in profit. But the um, the thing is, we are looking for higher value properties at this point. And if I was starting, I may want to walk before I run. You can do some lower value properties to just sort of get your feet wet and kind of prove the business model out and get it working and everything like that. And thankfully, those less expensive properties are definitely easier to get. You could send less mail and get more deals for that amount of mail that you send. Um, so I would refine your list as much as possible. First of all, I would probably do filters like out of area owners only. I would do smaller acreage ranges and combine it with like stuff like, okay, they've owned it for at least 10 years or something like that. So you can stack these filters all on top of each other to give yourself a higher kind of likelihood that the people that you're mailing to are actually going to be, interested in selling. But, I know investors that get that number down to about $1,000 in mail costs for every deal that they get, and I'm at 3,500 because I, go for the bigger deals. So it's a trade-off for sure. And so that would be what I would suggest.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, and then, so out of, let's say you send, I'm just going to use round numbers, out of 1,000 mail pieces that get sent out, like what sort of a response rate are you seeing on those?
Yeah, see, I don't really track that response rate, and I know that's contrary to what most people do with direct mail. But there're just so many different variables when we're doing what we're doing because each area is so different in this response rate. So I might send to a county in Kentucky, and I would get great responses, and I might send to some county in Pennsylvania and get terrible responses. Same number, same acreage range, everything like that. So I just the main metric that I look at is cost per deal. So I wish you know, I wish I had some more insight into that, but that's kind of what I've been focused
Yeah,
on.
no,
Yeah.
that's fair. And then, so of the people that are reaching out back to you, um, what percentage of those are like just taking the offer? What percentage are telling you to pound sand? And what percentage are just like leads that you need to be negotiating with, would you say?
Yeah, yes, that's good. So first of all, the properties that come back, we've got a certain percentage of people that call just to complain. That may be, 30% of our calls, something like that,
Yeah.
if I had to ballpark it. And then we get, a certain percent, that other remaining 70% are interested in selling at some price, but a good portion of those are properties that we don't want to buy as well. So they may come back. And one of our things is we try to buy only quality properties. There's a lot more properties that we could buy that get generated through our direct mail efforts, but I only buy properties that I consider to be good properties at this point. So there's a good percentage of those that I disqualify or my team disqualifies because they don't really meet our parameters. And then we've probably got about a third of them left, that are properties that we would like to buy that we are actively trying to put deals together with.
Yeah.
So
And of that percentage, how long does the negotiation period take? I'm sure it varies, but what would you say is like an average?
yeah, I'd say an average. We can generally get a deal locked up, in under 7 days or so. Now, some of them turn out to be like real long term things, where people initially tell us no about the price or they're just not sure about selling or things like that. And we've got a whole drip system that we put them into. And then, we recently just had one come back that I think it was a year and a half since they were initially a lead, and then they came back, and then we ended up, doing the deal with them. So, we keep them in our CRM and we keep them, we keep touching base with them. And, sometimes people just reply like months and months later, and then we end up putting a deal together there. So no rhyme or reason to it sometimes, but we try to lock them up pretty quickly if they've got the motivation and we're on the same page as price and all that stuff. So we try to make that go as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And on that initial offer, like what percentage off of what you think it's worth are you offering, or what the average
Yeah.
acre price is?
Yeah, yeah. So what our goal is with most of these properties is we're trying to buy for 50% or less of what we anticipate we can resell it for.
Okay.
So the variable on the resale side, it depends on the area. Some areas are really active market, and we know if we put the property on the market, it's going to sell for full retail right away. There are other markets which are not quite as exciting, I
Hot.
guess you could say. Yes, hot, yes. Where we've got to be more aggressive on the price in order to force the quicker sale. So our thing is about selling quickly. So it's just a matter of like evaluating where that market is at and trying to see how close we can get to retail value. So some areas we have to, put it out there at 70% of retail value in order to kind of force a quick sale.
Yeah.
So
So I think when a lot of people hear that, they're going to be like, how are you able to buy properties for 50% off and then basically resell them right away at a much higher retail value? Like, talk about the psychology and the process of how that's possible.
yeah, well, we're the convenience buyer. So we are not the full retail, put it on the market, wait for 6 to 12 months in order for that perfect retail buyer to come along.
Mm.
Any of our sellers, we let them know clearly that, hey, you can always go with a real estate agent, wait for that right buyer to come along. Many of the people don't have any interest in doing that. They need money faster than that. They didn't want that whole process to play out, and everything. And so we offer ourselves up in that type of scenario. Like, hey, if it makes sense for you, here's what makes sense for us. And we're not strong arming anyone into selling us the property for a super cheap price or anything like that. We just kind of let them know that what we could pay. If it makes sense for them, great. And if it doesn't, that is fine too. No harm, no foul. We kind of liken it to the fact that, like, if we use an analogy, like if you are, say, for instance, you want to buy a new car, and a lot of people have an existing car that they need to get rid of in order to buy their new car. So most people know that if you take that car and you sell it privately, you can get a higher amount for it than if you went to the dealer and you just traded it in. And when you trade it in at the dealer, you're going with the convenience option. You know you're not going to get top dollar for it. But most people do that because they don't want to have people come over to their house and post something on Craigslist, and who knows who they're going to meet in that process. So it's kind of a similar thing. We're the convenience buyer. We pay cash. We close quickly without any drama. And that's what we
I
do.
like that. I think the car example is a great example. I mean, it's the same thing with these guys that flip houses, right? They're obviously buying for much cheaper than retail, but they're the convenience offer. They can close fast. There's no nonsense. There's no games. There's no waiting. There's no showings. There's no agents. It can just move a lot faster. And I think what's interesting about land is the psychology, to me, at least as a newbie to this, is that they're a lot less attached to it. Like to your point, some people have inherited land from their great great grandfather that they don't live anywhere near it. They just basically just want some cash, and you're there to just give them the cash and let them walk away.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. And a couple sort of additional points to clarify on this. At a lot of these properties that at least at the beginning I was doing was like, hey, buy for 7,000. Anywhere you buy these properties from anywhere from like $7,000 up to 50,000. That like initially that's kind of the range I was working. So it's actually not that easy to find a good real estate agent or broker to resell a property for you. If you're like, hey, can you list this property for me for 29,000? Like it's tough to make any money as a real estate agent by dealing in properties of that, that size, where you're going to make just such a small commission. So a lot of these sellers have tried that route. They've tried to find an agent that would take a property that's worth that little amount and try to find, and it's just simply not easy. As an investor, we've got some more leverage with that because we're doing a lot of deals in these specific areas and things. So we're able to find good brokers and agents to help us out to resell these properties. So, so there's just a lot of scenarios like that come up.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. That makes total sense. Okay, so now let's talk about you've got, you've done your mail, you've analyzed your market, now people are contacting you. Um, how are you evaluating the deal from that point on? So after the initial conversation, I'm sure it goes something like, now we're going to go do our due diligence, or how does that next phase work?
Yeah. So typically, I've got acquisition managers that do all those calls with the sellers and everything. So typically, they're collecting that basic information. I've got someone on my team then that reviews the property and puts a value on it. Says, like, okay, we could either move forward with that original offer amount, or we could pay this amount for this reason, and then they go back to the seller and try to put the deal together. And then once we get the property under contract, then we do our in-depth due diligence. We send out someone to the property, a photographer that we hire to go out to the property. We get a local broker opinion on the property. We're closing everything through a title company as well. So getting that title report back is a part of our due diligence as well. Then I've got another member of my team that is calling the county or the city and the utilities and kind of going through a whole list of certain things to try to determine if the property is buildable. So we then review all that stuff to see if there are any sort of red flags on the property. And if there are, then we either let the seller know that we can't move forward because it's like an insurmountable red flag, or if it's something that fundamentally changes, what the property is worth, but we still want to buy it, then we would have a discussion with them if potentially renegotiate. But we don't actually do that too often. We try to just go through our due diligence to try to eliminate any potential red flags. That's our goal with that.
Yeah. And in the due diligence period, what are the like top 3 to 5 things you're looking for that could really like affect the value one way or the other?
Yeah, well, we put a lot of weight on our broker and agent partners that we resell these properties with. So if they come back to us and say, hey, this area, looks great on the map, but this area, this street is not good. they give us some sort of feedback that's really bad or negative, then obviously that would be a big problem for us. Sometimes on-site inspections on the property, sometimes when we get the photos back and our photographer walks the property or something, like they might have something that's not really evident on the satellite images. Like we've had stuff where there's, 20, 55-gallon drums of some type of liquid that's kind of like leaking, like stuff like that. I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, like I would, I don't want to know what's in those drums, and I don't want that to be my problem, with buying that property. So we've had stuff like that comes up. Title report, all kinds of crazy stuff can come up on the title report. I mean, one time I remember that I looked at the exceptions and it said, oh, this is previously registered as a landfill, this property. We had no clue. The seller didn't tell us that. And you couldn't even tell from being on the ground that everything, it was in the 50s, I guess. But,
Wow.
But I didn't want to end up buying a landfill, so.
Yeah, who knows what would have been under there.
Yeah, just crazy stuff. So so we've had a lot of issues with that. Sometimes neighbor things, we go out, the photographer goes out there and we run into a neighbor that's like very territorial and we'll say something like, no one's buying this property, or like they'll make statements like that where you can foresee like, okay, when we put this on the market, so this guy is just going to be a problem, and it's just not worth it. So
Yeah.
just stuff like that.
And then obviously, like, you're doing this remote all over the country. So what are some of the other ways you're looking at, just in terms of like how to like look at the piece of land and make sure that there's none of that stuff? Like obviously the title stuff you mentioned, but I know there's situations with like, it's in a floodplain, or it's got wetlands, or it's got like some endangered species on there and it's been deemed unbuildable, and things like that. Like, how are you finding
Yeah.
all that out?
Yeah. So the Land ID, the software we use, they've got overlays for much of those things. Like we can tell if there's wetlands on the property from initial glance. We can tell if there's FEMA flood zone. And those two things don't automatically disqualify a property, but it definitely factors into the value of the property for sure. Stuff like the contours of the slope of the property, we can tell. Yeah, we're always looking for access. Access is a big thing as well. If it has road frontage, it definitely is worth more than something that, has got some sort of dirt road trail leading to the property. And then if it is like a dirt road or a trail leading to the property, we always need to establish whether it's actually legal access as opposed to just some sort of, access that people have been using forever. So we don't buy any landlocked properties. I bought one at one point, and I vowed after that not to buy anymore. but there's a lot of those deals that come up too. You get a lot of leads on landlocked properties in some areas. So all that stuff is kind of important for us to check out for sure.
No, that makes sense. Okay. And then you said that software was Land ID.
Yes, Land ID. It used to be called MapRight, but they did like a rebranding thing. So I think the website address is id.land, but that's like a really crucial tool for us, because without it, I think this business would be really tough. See, you can look up in most counties, you can look up these properties in the county GIS system, but it's not as much detail. And some areas have better, coverage than others and stuff like that. But that's kind of like the first thing, like when a lead comes in, we're always looking at the map first on Land ID and seeing what that property is all about.
Got it. Okay. So property ID is what you use to get the seller information. You send the mailers. When they contact you, you're using Land ID to basically do the preliminary due diligence.
Yeah, exactly. That's when we're digging into the property itself. To build the lists, we're using data tree, or there's a number of different ones like property radar and ones like that we use, but PropStream. So you can build your list from a number of those sources like that. But when we're looking at the individual property, it's definitely Land ID is the best one that we found.
Cool. I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah.
Um, so now let's talk about exit strategy. I mean, it sounds like for the most part, you're buying and then trying to relist immediately at a higher amount. I've also heard of, back to the cash flow thing. I know people sometimes will sell with like seller financing, different things like that. What is your general exit strategy that you look for?
Yeah, our thing is generally is to just cash out as quickly as possible. So I've never held the note or never sold with seller financing. I know that's some land investors, that's all they do. They try to build a note portfolio based off of properties. It's a completely different game than what I do. But yeah, my goal is just to keep the cash moving as quickly as possible and do it that way. Now, I should say too that we do a fair amount of what we consider to be value add. We call it,
Okay.
meaning when we buy a property, we kind of take a look at minor things that can be done to increase the value of the property. That can be done pretty quickly. One of the big things that we do a lot of times is some brush clearing. And
Mm,
some of these properties have just been sitting, in their kind of natural state for many years, and they're so overgrown you can't even walk onto the property. It's like a jungle.
yeah.
Situations like that, it's really important to kind of open up some clearings and to make it so a prospective buyer can actually walk onto the property and walk through it and check it out. It's very tough to sell when no one can even access the interior of a property. So we do brush clearing a lot. We also do perk tests depending on the area. So if it's a property that we look at as a potential home site for someone, we'll hire a local soil scientist to do a perk test on that property to just kind of demonstrate that it's viable for a potential home site, because that's the biggest hurdle in a lot of these areas that we deal in. Um,
Okay. And
and
for
we did.
those that don't know, a perk test just gives you the option or availability of putting in septic.
Yes, exactly. Yes. You don't have to
And
worry
so,
about that in a lot of the more urban or city areas, but these rural areas, basically that's your waste system. So you can't
right,
connect to a sewer, so you get your kind of on-site thing happening.
you
So
need that.
yes, you
And
need
I'd
it.
imagine if it fails, then that dramatically affects the value of the property.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So because if it fails, you've got in many of these areas, you've got two options: either a very expensive on-site like waste processing, like mini facility. So that's or just sell it as a recreational property only. So
Yeah.
both
Okay,
of which
cool.
decrease the value.
I like that, the value add stuff. What
Yeah.
about like subdividing, things like that? Do you ever do any of that? Does that make sense for you?
Yes, and that's a great value add strategy that we do as often as we can. So essentially, we look for properties that might be a bigger property, say 50-acre property, and we might split it into 5, 10-acre properties and then sell them off. And the reason we do that is because we might be able to buy a 50-acre property for say $2,000 an acre, but if we split it up into 10-acre parcels, we may be able to sell those 10-acre parcels for $4,000 as an acre, just as a rough example. So just by
Okay.
simply splitting it up and reselling those that acreage off individually in 10-acre chunks, we're able to create the value that way. So that's an incredible value add strategy that we're always looking to do. That is one of our big ways that we're going to be scaling this year and in years into the future, is to doing that strategy as much as we can.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think a lot of people that are local here, we're both in San Diego, they hear subdividing and it probably makes their skin crawl because in
Uh,
California it takes years and it's a big pain in the butt and all the permitting and the red tape. But there's other states where it's pretty easy to subdivide and it can be as simple as like filling out a one-page document and sending it to the city.
Hey there, I just have a quick favor to ask. If you're getting value from Founders Club and you're watching on YouTube, just give us a like, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. These things are free to do, and it really helps the channel. And it also helps us be able to bring better guests for you in the future. Now back to the episode.
Yeah, it's so crazy, and I had that same mindset as you because I've tried to do stuff like that around here in San Diego, and it's a very extensive process. You got to spend a bunch of money on an engineer, and you got to jump through all the hoops at the county or whatever, and it's just and there's no sure thing about it. But in a lot of these states, they have like state mandates where as long as you're creating lots that are 10 acres and above or 5 acres and above, depending on what the area is, all it takes is simply like we just hire a surveyor in that particular area. They create a new map and they stake it out on the ground, record it with the county, and it's done. I mean, it could take a week, and
Yeah.
you're paying a surveyor to do it, but that's money well spent in my opinion. So it's almost every time I do it, it still boggles my mind that this could be done so easily. So I think it's kind of, there are a lot of investors that have done that over time, obviously, and it's been a great strategy, but there's still a bunch of opportunity in that space.
Yeah, most definitely. Um, what about in terms of like how you're funding all your deals? Is this all you personally? Do you have a fund? Do you syndicate this? Or and then also on the flip side of that, what would you recommend to someone getting started?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. Because it's different. Land is different than say single family homes and fix and flips. There's a lot of options out there. Hard money lenders that are willing to lend on those types of properties. So I started out just doing it kind of with our own cash. I had some money saved up and some investment money saved up, and we started somewhat slow on the cheaper properties, and we just kind of built that up over time. So using my own cash for pretty much every single deal, and trying to keep the money moving quickly, and trying to double our money on our deals. So that was the strategy. This last year, um, I've been able to connect with a number of private lenders, and essentially what they do is they will, on the higher dollar properties, I will bring them in and give them the details of the property. They'll lend money against the property, so that basically they'll do a private mortgage and note against that property. It gets recorded with the closing company and the title company and everything like that, and then they get paid a decent interest rate, pretty much hard money rates and some points, and then it's kind of a win-win scenario. The less
Nice.
expensive properties I still all do with their own cash, and for someone that is coming into this space, you may not have a big pile of cash saved up or something like that, but there's definitely still ways to get in the business. We actually have a program, and this is one of the reasons we're projecting to scale so fast this year and coming years. Is we have a program. It's called partnerwithpete.com, and essentially what it is investors can, as long as they get a deal under contract, they submit it on that site, and myself and my team kind of evaluate it. If it's a deal, basically if we're able to project that we're able to buy it for 50% of projected resale value, then we will agree to fund the deal, and essentially we'll partner with them on the deal. I'll plug it into my team's process. My team will take care of all the due diligence. If we have to spend some money on brush clearing or surveying or anything like that, we'll front all those costs. And then when we resell the property, we split the profits 50-50. So
Wow,
real
that's
win-win
killer.
scenario. Yeah, I had an
Yeah.
investor that we did this with. I've got I've got probably 50 properties like this going on right now, but one that we closed, I think we closed at the beginning of this year. No, in December, I think we closed it. But it was the investor got a wire transfer for $180,000. So
Oof,
as their
nice.
split of the deal. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
Yeah, so a couple thoughts on that. I think in terms of like getting started, what's really cool about land is that there's literally land you can buy for like $1,000 an acre. So if to your point, like when you first started, you were doing $7,000 deals, $5,000 deals. And so you can really start small if that's the option you want to go. But to your point, if you want to go out and start doing bigger deals right off the bat, as long as you can find them, underwrite them, then there's guys like you that will come in and offer the money, and not only the money, but all of your experience and mentorship and resources. And now you're 50-50 partners and you can go right out and do bigger deals. So that's very cool.
Yeah, yeah. It's we're trying to create a win-win type thing. And it's I don't know any other funders out there kind of taking over the whole process, because I know that can bog you down, all the due diligence, all the any value add stuff, and the marketing and the negotiating the contracts that come in, and the transaction on both the buy side and the resale side. It's like a lot of stuff. Um, but my goal in that is to just work with great investors that are just out there finding deals. We'll plug it into my team that I've built up to kind of support our business, and it can kind of be a win-win situation. So
Yeah. No, it's very cool. Smart for you and smart for them.
yeah, it's great for us, and it's been working out great for the investors too. So
Yeah. And then what about like in terms of deal killers out there? What do you think are like the top things that you're seeing that just make a deal a dead deal?
yeah, one of the things that comes up more frequently than I like it to are title issues with, say, heirs. Generally, people don't realize that there are other people that have a ownership interest in a property. So we get these properties that are handed down from one generation to the next, and we might have a particular family member that said, "Grandma, gave me this property, and I've been paying the property taxes for 20 years." But then, the estate, by the way the estate rules work in that area, there's other, grandchildren or something like that have actual claim to that property. So we might get
Yeah.
under contract with someone who claims they have the only ownership interest in a property. Title report comes back and they're like, "Well, I
It
noticed so
looks
and
like
so and so
cousin
and so didn't
Susie
sign the
also
contract."
is on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that happens, and then they may not want to sell, and it's so those types of things kill a deal, because what are you going to do? Like, just buy out a third of the property or something like that and own it
Yeah.
with some other random people, So that happens sometimes. We have sometimes we properties that are simply only like a buildable type property, like that's their main use. Could be a 2-acre property, like an infill lot somewhere, and it's not big enough to be a recreational property by any means. So we'll, may get under contract with the property like that, and let them know that, hey, we're going to get a perk test, and if it doesn't perk, then we can't go through with the deal, because that's all that can be really done with this property. So that
Yeah.
comes up, and it might fail a perk test, and we're kind of, our hands are kind of tied on that. So that happens sometimes. We determine it's not buildable for whatever reason. So
Yeah. And like you said, that's generally on the smaller, like infill type deals.
yeah, those are, you would think that the smaller properties would be easier, but the smaller properties are harder. So
Hmm.
in that
That's
way,
a, that's a
you just
good
got to
that's a good piece of advice from someone with a lot of experience.
you got to dot your i's, cross your t's, because all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff can come up.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Very cool. So, gonna be wrapping up here pretty soon, but like what would be some advice you would give to someone that was like looking to do this, looking to get started? What would you say to those people?
Yeah, I would say to just kind of go down the rabbit hole, learn all you can from investors that are doing this business. I've got a entirely free training program that I give out. It's 10 hours basically of videos that I've filmed, and I put a lot of effort into producing something as professional as I could. And I
Wow.
give that away 100% for free. And the reason I give it away for free is I'm trying to train investors how to find these deals, and then hopefully bring them to me so we can partner on them. So that's
Yeah,
my motivation behind
get
it.
more partnership opportunities for
Yeah,
sure.
that's right. So I'll
So,
make
so obviously, like that's a killer resource. How can someone find that free course that you've put together?
Yeah, so I've got that I've got a community called Land Conquest, and
Okay.
it's on the school platform if you're familiar with that, SKOOL.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's school.com/land conquest, or you can simply go to landconquest.com, and then that will send you through to the community as well. And yeah, so it's all in there in the classroom tab. And the other thing, which I think is really important in this business, is understanding how to evaluate these properties. It's different than single family homes. You might have a lot of experience in determining how to evaluate a single family home, but land is very different. There's specific things you need to look for and everything like that. So normally on a monthly basis within the community, I hold a Zoom call where I call it our deal evaluation Zoom call. So other community members basically submit their pieces of properties they're looking to buy, and I share my screen, go through exactly how I evaluate a property, give my best estimate of what I think we could resell the property for. But the cool thing about that is you can really understand how to evaluate these properties, exactly how I do it, and you'll see how you can do it too. And I've got about I don't know, 50 hours of that content that's up there in the community as well. So you can really, really learn a lot by watching those videos.
Awesome. Yeah, very cool. So definitely go check that out. One question I kind of like to wrap with is just in 60 seconds or less, what would you say is the key to being a successful land investor?
Okay. Well, there's a couple things. First of all, you got to really understand how to evaluate properties, and that ties back into, watching those deal evaluation calls or learning it in some other way. So you got to really understand that. The other thing that's really important is to have a lead generation system that is either on autopilot or super, super consistent. Like that's been one of our things. We send out 50,000 letters a month at this point, and we are sending out a batch of 25,000 letters every 2 weeks, like clockwork. Now, if you get busy handling leads and everything like that, and you forget to send out your mail, your business is always going to be like a big roller coaster. But as long as
Yeah.
you focus on keeping that gas in the engine like that, everything works out. If you got the deal flow, the business works. Where I
Mm.
see investors struggle is where they're trying to make something that's not a deal. They may go forward with something that's questionable and get stuck with it because they didn't have many options to choose from. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. And to your point, like it really is just a matter of sending out those mail pieces. It doesn't have to be an offer. It can be any sort of mail piece, but as long as you're consistent with it and you're able to continue generating people that raise their hand who are interested in selling a piece of land, and you can get them into those conversations, as long as you consistently do that, you're building up your pipeline and the deals will start to drop.
So true. So true.
Awesome, man. Well, Pete, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really
Same
appreciate
here.
you coming on. For those that want to connect with you, how can they connect with you?
Yeah. So on Instagram, I'm at Partner with Pete, and same on TikTok. Also, we've
Nice.
got a YouTube channel. It's at Turning Profit. Turning Profit is the name of our podcast. We do a weekly podcast all about land investing and everything like that. And then obviously in our land conquest community, I'm in there all the time answering questions and participating in whatever way I can. So
Cool. So definitely connect with Pete. Go out there and let's see if we can start doing some land deals. There's
yeah,
no
let's do it.
excuses not to. You've already got a partner that can help you fund deals, help you vet deals. So this is an absolute wonderful opportunity for the next couple of years. And appreciate you being on, Pete. As always, if you like money and you like real estate, hit that subscribe button. Check out the links in the description below, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Oliver.